Hello, I am Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. This video is a continuation of the lesson that I had begun in the previous video. So, in the previous video, which I link in the description box below, I had started explaining the multi store model of memory. And in that video, I had covered an explanation of an overview of the multi store model, sensory register, iconic memory, and I was almost done with echoic memory. So today I will continue from that point where I had left off with echoic memory, which is from the Darwin et al. Study. In the last video, I had given a lot of explanation on how you should prepare from the textbook, how you should approach the studies which are given and all. So if you want those suggestions, those tips, how you should be preparing, please watch the previous video. In this video, I will not be giving any tips or suggestions. I will strictly focus on covering the content which is there. And I will strongly recommend you watch the previous video before coming to this one, because it is going to be continued from there, so you might not be able to follow exactly what I'm doing if you haven't watched that video. Also on my channel you will find many videos in which I have covered answer writing for the examination for AQA A levels, both UK curriculum and international curriculum. I link the playlist in the description box and pinned comment below. So if you feel you're very good at the explanations, like everything is clear to you, the textbook content you know very well, and you just need help with exam answer writing, then you can proceed towards those videos. Or after watching this explanation video, I have covered memory in one of the videos. You must watch how to write exam answers also. Okay, now I will begin with this video. Last time I had left off with echoic memory, Darwin et al. Base study I had covered. So I won't be repeating that. Rather, now we look at Darwin et al.'s variation study. In the base study, the researchers established that echoic or auditory memory lasts for about 2 to 3 seconds. Now, what they did in a variation study, they replicated their base study, but they were looking for a different type of manipulation in this one. So, what they did, just like in the original study, they presented participants with lists of either digits or letters. But what they would do in this study is, on some trials, they would present participants with letter lists, and on some trials, they would present them with digit lists, that is number lists. So let's say on some trials, participants are getting to your letters such as A, P, X, T, Q, any random letters. And on some trials, they're getting to your digits. Again, random digits, say 7, 4, 2, 1, 9, and so forth. This time, Darwin et al. Wanted to compare, is auditory memory better for either of these lists? So it's a comparison between these two. So will participants be able to perform better for digits or for letters? Now, if they do perform better for one of the stimuli, that would indicate that some amount of processing takes place in the ear, in echoic memory. Last time I had explained that processing can take place in the brain, not in the sense organs. Sense organs are meant to receive information, they are receptors. But the brain is the one which processes or understands information. They just wanted to make sure that these sensory registers are not capable of any type of processing. If participants performed better on one of these type of lists, that means their ears would be able to distinguish whether they are hearing a letter list and or a digit list, and that's why they would be able to perform better for one of them. But this is what they did not find. What mattered was the duration of the trial, like we saw in the original experiment. They were again, after hearing either of the lists, asked to recall it. They were given a recall cue. It did not matter. What the result showed is, it did not matter whether it was a digit list or a letter list. If the recall cue was given within 2 to 3 seconds, they recalled well. They were able to report whatever letters or numbers had been given. If the recall was delayed, it was asked after 2 or 3 seconds that cue was given to recall, then they performed poorly. So if recall was within 2 to 3 seconds, they gave a good performance. And if recall was after 2 or 3 seconds, it was delayed. In that case, they gave a poor performance. Which just goes to show that the ears are not capable of distinguishing between letters and numbers, because this result was found for both types of lists. And this study helps to verify the broader principle which we have seen. Coding in sensory registers is in raw form. That's why it doesn't matter what type of stimulus is there. The job of the sensory register is just to hold that information for some time as it is. And that is what it does. So, I don't want to give too many suggestions in this video, but if you're writing an answer, something about coding in sensory registers, this study can be a good supporting strength type of a study in EO3, because it goes to validate that coding in sensory registers is in raw form. With that, I complete sensory registers. This is how much you need to know in your syllabus. Let us come back to the multi-store model, the notes which we were looking at, and now we have to proceed towards short-term memory. Here we need to remember that there are three memory stores according to Atkinson and Shiffrin. One is sensory memory or sensory register, the other is short-term memory, and the other is long-term memory. So far we have looked at sensory memory. What happens is, if we pay attention to whatever is then sensory memory, that gets transferred to what is called short-term memory. We saw that from sensory registers, information just fleets away. Like just now we were saying, if I hear a number or letter list, it's just going to disappear in 2 or 3 seconds. But if I pay careful attention to the number or letter lists which are being spoken out, in that case, it will get transferred to short-term memory. It will move forward instead of just getting deleted or being forgotten. Now, what is this short-term memory? What is its duration, capacity, and coding? Now we will look at that. So let's come to the topic of short-term memory. Short-term memory is that temporary storehouse of information which holds information for about 18 to 30 seconds. As I had mentioned in the last video, it is very important to memorize these durations exactly. We will be looking at all of these in details individually. So right now we can just have an overview. Duration is for less than 30 seconds. The capacity of how much information it can hold, here they've called information as item, is 7 plus or minus 2. Meaning it can hold about 5 to 9 pieces of information. This is the range. We will see classic studies around this. So right now, if we don't understand, it's okay. Just factually, we can take it that short-term memory can hold 5 to 9 pieces of information. There are individual variations. Some people can remember as less as 5 and some people as much as 9. And it encodes information acoustically by sound. Short-term memory does not hold information in raw form, unlike sensory registers. Rather, it processes information into sound form, auditory form, and then it holds information. So let us begin with short-term memory with its capacity. The first thing we'll be looking at is the capacity of short-term memory. There is something mentioned about maintenance rehearsal as well. Right now, I'm not dealing with it. When we link short-term memory to long-term memory, that time we look at it. It's relevant for transfer to long-term memory. Let's begin with short-term memory capacity. That's the first thing we saw here. I hope you remember, in general, capacity refers to how much information can be held in a memory store. Now, to investigate how much information short-term memory in particular can hold, several classic studies have been done. The most important study is by Jacobs. This is classic research work. I would recommend that you remember the name of Jacobs if you're writing this in the paper. He did digit span task to investigate memory, and he found that short-term memory can hold 5 to 9 items. In the paper, in fact, they can give you situations in which a researcher is performing a task in which they are giving number list to participants of varying like total number of digits which are there on the list, and they can ask you what is that. So you should know what a digit span is. When it comes to these classic studies like the one by Jacobs, there are many such studies. The tasks which they have performed to investigate capacity, those tasks have become so popular and they have been repeated and replicated so often that they have become paradigms by themselves. Like digit span task has been used originally by Jacobs to find out how much information STM can hold. But many researchers have used this same task in their study to investigate various aspects of capacity of STM, such that it's become a paradigm. A paradigm is any experimental task which becomes so popular, which is such a good way of investigation that it is used in many studies. That is why remembering what digit span is important as a task, because like I said in the paper, they can ask you an application also. So let us look at it little more closely. They haven't given much in the textbook also when it comes to Jacob's digit span task, but I would like to explain to you how such experiments progress. Having an understanding of this is important. In a digit span task, which is a very simple task, a researcher will read out some digits to participants, just like we saw in Darwin et al. Study. The researcher will begin with a small series of digits. So, say I'm the researcher, there's a participant in front of me. I will read out in monotone and in equal spacing a few digits. So, say this is the first trial that we are performing. On this, I read out to the participant numbers like 3, 5, 7. What is the participant's job? Just to repeat what I have said. So once I complete with 7, I will instruct him recall. So he has to repeat and say 3, 5, 7. He has to repeat in the same order in which I have given the digits. So I will mark, okay, the participant can recall 3 digits which are read aloud. Next, I will give him 4 digits on the next trial. So say on the next trial, I say 2, 9, 8, 1. Recall. The participant has to recall. Say he reports correctly. Now this is how all trials will proceed. So on the third trial, I will give 5 digits. On the fourth trial, I will give 6 digits. On the fifth trial, I will give 7 digits. I will keep on reading out digits on every trial, increasing by 1 digit with every trial, and see till what extent the participant is able to remember. Now let's say, for example, this participant who's in front of me, when we come to the sixth trial, I'm giving him 8 digits. So I give him 9, 2, 1, 4, 8, 3, 0, 5. Okay, so some numbers I have read aloud. Now I tell recall. This time the participant remembers up to 7 digits. The last digit the participant is not able to report. So he does say 92148830 and he goes blank. Then he doesn't know which is the last one. So now what I will consider as a researcher is the participant was able to recall all the digits up till the point that I gave him 7 digits. So up till the fifth trial, he was able to remember all digits. When he faltered is when I read out 8 digits, then it was difficult. He could remember only up to 7. So what I will conclude is this participant's short-term memory capacity is 7 digits. The same experiment I can repeat for many participants, say hundreds of participants in my study. So that is how Jacobs used to do his study. For every participant, I can note down how many digits maximum they are able to recall. And then I can calculate an average. On an average, how many digits participants can recall on a digit span task. Whatever that average comes to, we will estimate that most people's average STM capacity is that. So researchers have removed an average and they have found most people are able to remember 7 digits. Once we give them more than 7 digits, they find it difficult to recall. Also, they have estimated a range, they have calculated a range using these experiments only. And what they found is at a minimum, people are able to remember 5 digits, and maximum, they have found people are able to remember 9 digits. So, 7 is the mean STM capacity, 5 to 9 is the range of the STM capacity. Now, this research was done by Jacobs. Later came Miller, who replicated many of Jacobs' experiments, and he also found the same. When he repeated the experiments, he also came to the same mean and the average. Then he gave what is called the magic number. He repeated it in so many studies and so many times he found that this is only the range in which capacity is there, that he started calling it the magic number, like one definite answer to STM capacity, and he summarized it as 7 plus or minus 2. What 7 plus or minus 2, this magic number indicates is that on an average short-term memory capacity is 7, but the range depending on the person can be as low as 5 to as high as 9. We know 7 plus 2 is 9 and 7 minus 2 is 5. So this magic number which is given 7 plus or minus 2, it summarizes both the mean and the range of short-term memory. There are more studies done on STM capacity. Very important are studies which have been done on chunking. Let's say, firstly, practically speaking, you're listening, say, to something. Say you're listening to something as simple as a shopping list. And we don't know why, but for some reason you don't have a mobile phone or a pen and paper on which you can note down the items which have to be bought from the supermarket. So you're trying to memorize the shopping list. Now your short-term memory capacity, say you're very good at short-term memory, it is 9 pieces of information. So instead of these digits, imagine your mother or someone is telling you one after the other 15 items that she wants you to buy from the supermarket. And before leaving for the supermarket, you have to memorize well and go. Now, how will you remember 15 items? That is the question, because your capacity, say it is 9. So what researchers were speculating was that is there some way to increase short-term memory capacity? Like, is it that we will be able to remember only maximum 9 raw pieces of information? Or is it that some way in which we can process information? Here by processing, I don't mean coding. Like, can we summarize or club information, group information in some way? That, okay, my short-term memory has, we can take it as 9 slots to remember information. Everyone's having between like 7 to 9 slots. Say my short-term memory is having 9 slots to remember information. So these 9 slots which are available, instead of just putting 9 pieces of information in these slots, can I like put 2 to 3 pieces of information in each slot so that I can remember more items rather than just 9. So researchers started looking in this direction. First, I'll give you a simple example before we look at the actual experiment. Say, for example, someone is reading out number of digits for me to remember, say on an experiment. Now they read out something like 1987. Okay, these are 4 unique digits. Now either I can use the slots or the capacity which is available in my short-term memory such that each of these digits will block one slot which I'm having. But what if instead of this, because it sounds like a year, and say this is the year when my aunt was born, 1987. So can I fit in this 1987 in just one slot? So that instead of having 4 slots blocked, I have 1 slot blocked and 8 slots are free to hold other information. This is the concept of chunking. Grouping information together instead of keeping it in raw form like 4 separate stimuli, grouping it together such that it can form a chunk or a collective piece which will occupy less space in capacity. That is the concept of chunking. Now they have given some research in the textbook. We can look at what research has been done into chunking. Okay, this research has been done by Simon. Here I would suggest, if you don't remember the name of Simon, it's okay. These are all classic studies. It's just that some have more weightage than others. So you can see some researchers did a famous study on chunking. In this study, what Simon did was he actually gave chunks to participants to remember rather than individual pieces of information. Now, these chunks were manipulated such that they were either one syllable, two syllable, or three syllable.